In 1984, Red Dawn showed teenagers forced to grow up overnight. But after 42 years later, their real lives turned darker, marked by divorce, illness, obscurity, and survival. Join us as we uncover what happened after the cameras stopped rolling and honor the legacies they left behind. Patrick Swayze as Jed Eckert. Patrick Swayze was born on August 18, 1952, in Houston, Texas, USA. At 32 years old, he played Jed Eckert, the determined leader of a small-town resistance group, in Red Dawn. The role anchored the film's moral weight, transforming a story about invasion into one about responsibility, fear, and the cost of growing up too fast. That gravity did not appear by accident. Away from the camera, Swayze's early years were shaped by pressure rather than comfort, raised by a strict father and a relentlessly disciplined mother, dance instructor Patsy Swayze. When a devastating knee injury ended his football ambitions, it forced a painful pivot toward dance and acting. However, this experiences later fed the physical control seen in Dirty Dancing and the restrained toughness of Roadhouse. That same instinct carried into his marriage. Swayze married Lisa Nemi in 1975, and for 34 years they held on to each other through circumstances that quietly broke many couples, even as global fame followed films like Ghost and Point Break. A miscarriage left them without children, and after his father's death, Swayze spiraled into alcoholism, nearly undoing both his home life and his career before confronting his addiction head-on. Just as stability returned, his body betrayed him. In early 2008, Swayze was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, a diagnosis that arrived without mercy and offered little hope, even as he continued working and appearing publicly while projects like The Beast kept him in front of the camera. Treatment weakened him visibly, yet he refused to retreat, turning his remaining strength into resolve rather than surrender. Finally, he died at 57 years old on September 14, 2009, at his home in Los Angeles, after a relentless 20-month battle with pancreatic cancer. His estimated $40 million net worth, built through film, music, and real estate, stood in sharp contrast to the quiet ending he chose as his ashes were scattered privately, closing the story of a man who spent his life standing tall even while breaking inside. C. Thomas Howell as Robert Morris. C. Thomas Howell was born on December 7, 1966, in Los Angeles, California, USA. At 18 years old, he played Robert Morris, one of the teenagers thrust into armed resistance in Red Dawn. His presence helped make the film unsettling, reminding audiences that the fighters on screen were still children forced into adult violence. That loss of innocence echoed Howell's own upbringing. Raised on film sets by his father, stuntman Chris Howell, he entered Hollywood early, learning the mechanics of fame before learning how to protect himself from it. This tension was visible during his rise through E.T., The Extraterrestrial, and The Outsiders. Success arrived quickly, but emotional grounding never fully followed, leaving him exposed once expectations grew heavier than his age could carry. The cracks widened in his personal life. Howell married Rae Dawn Chong in 1989, but the marriage collapsed within a year as public backlash surrounding Soul Man reshaped his career overnight, turning promise into controversy. A second marriage to Sylvie Anderson brought 3 children and years of stability, even as he worked steadily in projects like Gettysburg, yet it ended in divorce in 2016, reinforcing a pattern of rebuilding after emotional collapse. As leading roles slipped away, Howell was forced into a quieter form of survival. He moved away from youthful stardom and into character work and long-form television, appearing consistently in projects like Southland. Today, C. Thomas Howell is 60 years old. He continues acting while also releasing music under the name Tommy Howell, turning personal history into creative fuel rather than regret, alongside recent screen work that reflects persistence rather than resurgence. With an estimated net worth of around $4 million, his story now feels less like a comeback and more like a man still walking forward after Hollywood stopped waiting for him. Lea Thompson, as Erica Mason. Lea Thompson was born on May 31, 1961, in Rochester, Minnesota, USA. At 23 years old, she played Erica Mason, the emotionally grounded female presence among the Wolverines, in Red Dawn. Her role quietly humanized the film, giving its violence a personal cost and reminding audiences what was being lost beyond the battlefield. That sensitivity came from a childhood built on discipline rather than comfort. Raised in a large family by her mother, Barbara Barry Thompson, a musician, Lea committed to ballet from the age of 9, training relentlessly with the hope of a professional career. When Mikhail Baryshnikov rejected her for being too stocky, the dream collapsed in a single sentence, forcing her to abandon dance and redirect her identity toward acting, a shift that later fed performances in Back to the Future and Some Kind of Wonderful. The same turning points followed her into adulthood. Thompson became engaged to Dennis Quaid between 1984 and 1987, a high-profile relationship that ended quietly as careers pulled them in different directions. Stability finally arrived when she married director Howard Deutsch in 1989, forming a long-lasting partnership that grew alongside her work in projects like Howard the Duck and her television success on Caroline in the City. However, as Hollywood moved on from 1980s stardom, she reinvented herself, stepping behind the camera to direct and produce while continuing to act in long-form television such as Switched at Birth. The shift was not glamorous, but it allowed her to remain relevant without surrendering control of her career. Now, Lea Thompson is 65 years old. She remains active as an actress and director, working steadily on television and streaming projects, including directing episodes for science fiction series in recent years. With an estimated combined net worth of around $25 million shared with her husband, her story is not one of collapse, but of adaptation, choosing longevity over noise and purpose over nostalgia. Charlie Sheen as Matt Eckert. Charlie Sheen was born on September 3, 1965 in New York City, USA. At 19 years old, he played Matt Eckert, the impulsive younger brother pulled into guerrilla warfare in Red Dawn. His performance amplified the film's volatility, capturing how recklessness and fear can collide when youth is forced into survival. That intensity was rooted in an upbringing steeped in cinema. As the son of Martin Sheen and Janet Templeton, Charlie grew up making Super 8 films with friends like Rob Lowe and Sean Penn, learning early that cameras could both empower and expose. Fame arrived quickly through films like Platoon and Wall Street, but so did addiction, with alcohol and drugs becoming part of his life before adulthood fully settled in. Success did little to stabilize his personal relationships. Sheen married Donna Peel in 1995, a union that ended within a year amid scandals and mounting substance abuse. His second marriage to Denise Richards produced 2 daughters, but collapsed under accusations of addiction and volatility, and a third marriage to Brooke Mueller followed the same pattern, ending in divorce after the birth of twin sons and repeated public incidents. As his private life unraveled, his health delivered another blow. Diagnosed HIV positive. In 2011, Sheen revealed he had been living with the condition for years while continuing to spiral publicly, losing his role on 2.5 Men at the height of his television dominance. The disclosure reframed his behavior overnight, turning tabloid chaos into something far darker and irreversible. Today, Charlie Sheen is 61 years old. He continues to appear in smaller film and television projects while living with controlled HIV, far removed from the era when he was the highest-paid actor on television. With an estimated net worth of around $3 million, reduced dramatically from earlier fortunes by legal battles and excess, his story remains one of Hollywood's most painful contradictions. Immense success, followed by equally public self-destruction. Jennifer Grey as Toni Mason. Jennifer Grey was born on March 26, 1960, in New York City, USA. At 24 years old, she played Toni Mason, the fiercely loyal, emotionally exposed sister among the Wolverines, in Red Dawn. Her performance added vulnerability to the film, making loss feel intimate rather than heroic. She grew up surrounded by art and expectation as the daughter of Oscar-winning actor Joel Grey and former actress Jo Wilder, training in dance and acting from a young age. That discipline carried her into early roles like Reckless and Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Then fame arrived too fast. Dirty Dancing turned Grey into a global icon overnight, but the success was poisoned by trauma when a 1987 car accident in Northern Ireland killed 2 people and left her with lasting survivor's guilt. As Hollywood expected her to capitalize on stardom, she quietly unraveled, retreating from the spotlight while appearing sporadically in projects like Bloodhounds of Broadway. The deepest blow came not from scandal, but from choice. In the early 1990s, Grey underwent rhinoplasty that permanently altered her face, effectively erasing her recognizability in an industry that had already branded her image. "I went into the operating room a celebrity and came out anonymous," she later admitted, as roles dried up and her career stalled despite continued work in television and later a triumphant return by winning Dancing with the Stars. Now, Jennifer Grey is 66 years old. She continues acting selectively, writes, and reflects openly on fame, identity, and loss, supported by an estimated $10 million net worth built through film, television, and residuals. Her story remains one of Hollywood's quiet tragedies, proof that success can vanish not with a fall, but with a single, irreversible change. Powers Boothe, as Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Tanner. Powers Boothe was born on June 1, 1948 in Snyder, Texas, USA. At 36 years old, he played Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Tanner, the battle-hardened pilot who becomes a reluctant mentor, in Red Dawn. His authority grounded the film, lending it a sense of real-world consequence beyond youthful rebellion. He was raised on a cotton farm, far from Hollywood, shaped by physical labor and discipline rather than glamour. Football first offered him escape, but theater became his calling after earning scholarships, a path that later informed his commanding performances in projects like Guyana Tragedy, The Story of Jim Jones, and Tombstone. That steadiness extended into his personal life. Boothe married Pamela Cole in 1969, and the two remained together for nearly 5 decades, raising their children, Paris and Preston, away from public spectacle. While his career flourished with complex, often morally ambiguous roles in Deadwood and Nixon, his private life remained strikingly intact. Behind the scenes, however, his body began to fail. Boothe was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, an aggressive illness that progressed quietly while he continued working, including later appearances in Agents of SHYELD. The disease ultimately led to cardiopulmonary failure, ending his life without the prolonged public battle seen in many Hollywood deaths. Sadly, Powers Boothe died at 68 years old on the morning of May 14, 2017, in Los Angeles, California, from cardiopulmonary arrest caused by pancreatic cancer. With an estimated $8 million net worth earned through decades of film, television, and ranching, he was laid to rest privately, leaving behind a legacy defined not by fame, but by gravity, discipline, and quiet authority. Harry Dean Stanton as Tom Eckert. Harry Dean Stanton was born on July 14, 1926, in West Irvine, Kentucky, USA. At 58 years old, he played Tom Eckert, the weary, grounded father figure whose quiet strength anchors the emotional core of Red Dawn. His restrained presence gave the film its moral weight, reminding audiences that war scars families long before it reaches battlefields. That gravity came from a childhood shaped by instability. Raised in a working-class household, Stanton grew up watching his parents divorce and remarry, a cycle that left him emotionally untethered. Those early fractures followed him into adulthood, fueling the haunted stillness he later carried into films like Cool Hand Luke and Alien. Romantic stability never arrived. Stanton never married, drifting through brief relationships, including one with Rebecca De Mornay, but ultimately choosing solitude over permanence. As his peers built families, he poured himself into work, turning supporting roles in Repo Man and The Godfather Part 2 into unforgettable moments that eclipsed many leading men. Sadly, Harry Dean Stanton died at 91 years old on September 15, 2017 in Los Angeles, California, from natural causes related to heart failure. His ashes were placed in Nicholasville, Kentucky, returning him to the land that shaped his loneliness. With an estimated $10 million net worth, he left behind not a dynasty, but a legacy of quiet truth, proof that some lives echo longest when spoken softly. Darren Dalton as Daryl Bates. Darren Dalton was born on February 9, 1965 in Powell, Wyoming, USA. At 19 years old, he played Daryl Bates, the mayor's son caught between privilege and fear, in Red Dawn. His role added tension to the group dynamic, exposing how courage fractures under pressure. His early life was defined by wide spaces and restlessness. Growing up in rural Wyoming before moving to New Mexico, Dalton found escape through theater after discovering stagecraft in high school. That spark carried him into The Outsiders, setting the stage for his rapid rise alongside future stars. Fame, however, proved fleeting. After Red Dawn, Dalton struggled to find footing in an industry that moved on quickly, drifting between television roles and independent films like Dancing in the Forest. Behind the scenes, his marriage to Kristen Dalton in 1993 offered brief stability, but the relationship fractured under career uncertainty, ending in divorce in 2009. Instead of chasing lost momentum, Dalton reinvented himself. He shifted toward screenwriting and producing, channeling frustration into projects such as The Day the Earth Stopped and The Lurking Fear. The transition kept him working, but far from the spotlight he once shared. Today, Darren Dalton is 61 years old. He continues to write, produce, and occasionally act, maintaining a low-profile creative life supported by an estimated $1 million net worth. His story remains a sobering reminder that youthful fame can vanish overnight, and survival in Hollywood often means learning how to disappear without giving up. Brad Savage as Danny Bates. Brad Savage was born on December 9, 1965, in Livonia, Michigan, USA. At 19 years old, he played Danny Bates, the soft-spoken, loyal younger brother whose fear made the danger in Red Dawn feel painfully real. His performance brought innocence into a film defined by violence, making loss hit closer to home. That vulnerability came from an unusual childhood. Raised in an artistic family alongside his sister Tracy Savage, Brad entered show business at just 2 years old, growing up under studio lights rather than in classrooms. By the time he appeared in projects like No Deposit, No Return, acting was not a dream, but a routine, leaving little room for a normal adolescence. As adulthood arrived, the industry shifted. While Red Dawn earned him a Young Artist Award nomination, the transition from child actor to adult roles proved unforgiving. Opportunities thinned, and Savage gradually stepped away from the camera, redirecting his creativity into behind-the-scenes work while peers continued chasing fame. Stability came through family rather than stardom. He married Bronwyn R. Craig in 1988, building a life far removed from Hollywood chaos, while still staying connected to performance through music, playing bass and singing in projects linked to his early fame. Acting became a chapter, not a destination. Now, Brad Savage is 61 years old. He works in music and media production, living quietly with an estimated $1 million net worth earned through acting, marketing, and creative ventures. His story is a quiet reckoning with early fame, proof that growing up too fast can mean learning when to step away. Doug Tobey as Aardvark Mondragon. Doug Toby was born on July 13, 1964 in Los Angeles, California, USA. At 20 years old, he played Aardvark Mondragon, the sarcastic, streetwise outsider whose humor masked fear in Red Dawn. His presence added grit to the group, reflecting the chaos beneath teenage bravado. Growing up in Los Angeles placed him close to the industry, but far from its protections. Little is known about his early family life, yet his youth unfolded on the edges of Hollywood, where opportunity was visible but never guaranteed. Acting became an opening rather than a calling. After Red Dawn, Toby appeared in films like Walking the Edge, but momentum stalled quickly. As studios shifted focus and franchises replaced character-driven roles, his career faded into sporadic appearances, leaving him without the safety net many child and teen actors never receive. He moved quietly out of the spotlight. In 2026, Doug Toby is 62 years old. He lives largely outside the entertainment industry, with an estimated $500,000 net worth tied to early acting work. His story is one of abrupt silence, how a single iconic role can echo forever, even as the actor behind it quietly fades away. Ben Johnson as Mr. Mason. Ben Johnson was born on June 13, 1918, in Foraker, Oklahoma, USA. At 66 years old, he played Mr. Mason, the stoic, old-school patriarch whose calm authority adds moral gravity in Red Dawn. His presence grounded the film, giving its chaos a sense of lived-in American history. That authenticity was earned early. Raised on the Osage Indian Reservation, Johnson grew up working ranch land and competing in rodeo alongside his father, a champion cowboy. Those years shaped the physical confidence he later carried into westerns like She Wore a Yellow Ribbon and Wagon Master. Hollywood arrived almost by accident. After years as a stuntman, John Ford pushed him into speaking roles, a leap that eventually led to The Last Picture Show. The Oscar-winning performance revealed a tender depth beneath the hard exterior, but it also exposed a stubborn independence that cost him work when he refused to bend to powerful directors. At home, life was steadier than his career. Johnson married Carol Elaine Jones in 1941, and they remained together until her death in 1994. While acting continued, he invested quietly in ranching and real estate, building wealth far beyond his screen image. Sadly, Ben Johnson died at 77 years old on April 8, 1996, after suffering a heart attack while visiting family in Mesa, Arizona. He was buried in Pawhuska, Oklahoma, returning to cowboy country one last time. With an estimated $100 million net worth, his legacy stands as proof that discipline, not fame, was the real fortune he carried. Ron O'Neal as Colonel Bella. Ron O'Neal was born on September 1, 1937, in Utica, New York, USA. At 47 years old, he played Colonel Bella, the cold, calculating Cuban commander whose menace defines the enemy, in Red Dawn. His controlled intensity gave the film a villain rooted in ideology rather than caricature. That steel was forged early. Raised in a struggling Cleveland neighborhood, O'Neal lost his father at 16, then his brother months later, tragedies that forced him into adulthood overnight. Theater became refuge, and later rebellion, leading to the breakout role that changed everything, Superfly. Success came with a price. After starring in and directing Superfly TNT, O'Neal found himself typecast, locked into criminal archetypes while broader opportunities slipped away. The frustration followed him into his personal life. His first marriage to Carol Tillery Banks ended in divorce in 1980, mirroring the instability of his career. Even as television roles in The Equalizer and A Different World revived his visibility, his health began to fail. Diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, O'Neal worked through pain, aware that time was narrowing while his reputation remained unresolved. Finally, he died at 66 years old on January 14, 2004, in Los Angeles, California, after a long battle with pancreatic cancer. He was survived by his wife Audrey Poole, whom he married in 1993. With an estimated $1 million net worth, his life remains a stark reminder of how brilliance can collide with industry limits, and how some legacies are only fully understood after silence follows. William Smith as Colonel Strelnikov. William Smith was born on March 24, 1933, in Columbia, Missouri, USA. At 51 years old, he played Colonel Strelnikov, the ruthless Soviet commander whose icy authority embodies the film's existential threat, in Red Dawn. His performance sharpened the film's tension, giving the enemy a chilling intelligence rather than brute force. That precision came from a demanding early life. Raised on a cattle ranch before his family migrated to California during the Dust Bowl aftermath, Smith grew up disciplined and intellectually driven, mastering languages while balancing physical training. Those traits later surfaced in Laredo and Rich Man, Poor Man. As fame followed, marriage brought its own fractures. Smith married Michelle, a union that ended quietly, and later wed Joanne Cervelli, with whom he had 2 children. While his career surged through projects like Conan the Barbarian and Any Which Way You Can, the personal cost was constant absence, a life spent more on sets than at home. Health eventually closed in. Diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, Smith's decline was slow and cruel, erasing the sharp intellect that once defined him. Even as memory faded, his earlier work, from Rumblefish to Red Dawn, stood as proof of a man who commanded every frame he entered. William Smith died at 88 years old on July 5, 2021, in Los Angeles, California, after complications from Alzheimer's disease. He passed quietly at a motion picture care facility, leaving behind an estimated $7 million net worth earned across an 80-year career. Frank McRae as Mr. Teasdale. Frank McRae was born on March 18, 1941, in Memphis, Tennessee, USA. At 43 years old, he played Mr. Teasdale, the history teacher whose moral courage sparks resistance, in Red Dawn. His brief but powerful role reminded audiences that defiance doesn't always wear a uniform. Before acting, McRae's life followed a different battlefield. Raised in Tennessee, he excelled in football, earning a spot with the Chicago Bears before turning toward drama. That physical authority later translated into memorable performances in Dillinger and Walking Tall Part 2, where strength and vulnerability coexisted. Marriage brought stability and strain. McRae married Lana Durden in 1964, and they had a son, Marcellus, before divorcing years later. As his career expanded with films like 48 Hours and License to Kill, long shoots and constant travel quietly reshaped his family life. Health struggles were less public, but no less fatal. Years of physical wear from football and action-heavy roles took their toll, even as he continued working into later life, including Batteries Not Included and National Lampoon's Vacation. His body carried decades of impact long before his heart failed. Frank McRae died at 80 years old on April 29, 2021, in Santa Monica, California, after a heart attack. He left behind a legacy of authority figures and reluctant heroes, along with an estimated $2 million net worth earned through acting and sports. Time changed their faces. Fate changed their lives. But the impact of Red Dawn, 1984, never faded. From fearless youth to hard-earned legacies, these stories still echo decades later. Which cast member's journey shocked you the most, and whose story stayed with you after the credits rolled? If these memories moved you, like the video, share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more then and now stories, because some films never stop living on.